Since the inception of our species, since the birth of humanity, we have asked a very important question. What makes a man a man? Or more aptly, what makes a being human? If you can't read and couldn't tell by the title of this video, I'm talking about Frankenstein. Recently, I had just read the book for the first time after it being on my list of books to read for, well, quite a long time. Some background information about the book. Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus, written by Mary Shelley, was originally published in 1818. Later on, in 1831, the more widespread version of the story was published after receiving much editing from the 1818 version. Mary Shelley, the author, was an English woman born in 1797. She is said to have wrote Frankenstein in 1817 around the age of 19. Now let me just say, the stuff I wrote at 19 pales in comparison to what she was able to accomplish at the same age. Mary was well endowed as a writer, but was left quite poor in other facets of life, such as the fact she was born English. She also lost 3 of her children. Her mother also died very shortly after her own birth. Even after writing Frankenstein, there were some who doubted her and claimed that it was truly her husband, Percy Shelley, who was the mastermind behind the tale. I could go on to tell you all about Mary's life and paint a beautiful picture for you, but simply, I think it is crucial to understand where it is this story came from. Hold up. Before we go any farther, I'm going to give you a little rundown on the story of Frankenstein in case some of you are a little unfamiliar with it. Then we will get down and dirty talking about some of the deeper themes and parallels in this book. The book starts off from the perspective of Captain Walton, an English ship captain who is ambitious and eager to cement himself with some sort of legacy. He is writing letters of his journey to the Arctic Circle back to his sister in London. It is by the 4th letter that Walton and his crew witness a sled pulled by dogs racing across the Arctic ice, being commanded by what only looks like a man of gigantic stature. The next morning on the ice, the crew find a matching sled with one surviving dog and man. The man is the character we all know, Victor Frankenstein. Walton takes Victor in, and after a while upon the vessel, Victor begins to relay his life story, and how that led him to the moment of being on the Arctic ice. When I mean his life story, it is truly his life story. Victor is Swiss, born in Italy, to 2 young, loving, and well-spirited Europeans. They traveled a lot when he was young, and eventually his parents took in a girl about Victor's age named Elizabeth. She was basically adopted as a Frankenstein and was like Victor's sister. Eventually his parents would have 2 more children, both boys. After the birth of the second son, the Frankenstein family would settle down in Geneva, where young Victor would meet his best friend, Henry Clerval. Now Victor was stubborn and compulsive and possessed quite the temper. Despite this, Victor was fascinated by the world of natural philosophy, the secrets of heaven and earth and their answers, which he desired and sought after. He was smart and well-educated, but he was still arrogant, so when he found the answers, even if they were the wrong ones, he stood by them. Years later, when he turned 17, his parents wished for him to continue his educational career at the University of Ingolstadt. Just as he was fixed to leave for university, though, dear Elizabeth had come down with a case of scarlet fever, and well, let's just say it didn't look good. Basically, she was going to die until our saving grace, Victor's mother, just couldn't bear to see her adoptive daughter die, stepped in, saving her. While this was very noble, she happened to catch the scarlet fever herself. She must not have been wearing her N95 mask. She then died because of this choice. Yes, yes, the Frankenstein family were very, very sad about this happening. Well, anyway, time for Victor to go to university, like they all planned for him to. Victor arrives in Ingolstadt and starts learning, but right away, this professor is like, yeah, all those natural philosophy books you spent years reading and swearing by? Trash. Garbage. Literal dog shit. Get that nonsense out of my face. So obviously, being very upset about this, Victor is basically like, okay, yeah, whatever, and does a full 180 and actually starts doing really well in school, particularly in chemistry. Ew. He then becomes really obsessed with human anatomy and looks at it and is like, hey, I can do that, but better. Because remember, he's arrogant. So he does that, except he neglects to tell Walton the secret to how he did it. Yes, remember, this is a retelling of his life to Walton, because he doesn't want the knowledge to lead to more people making the same mistake as him. He creates this giant man, said to be around 8 feet tall, and breathes life into it. He instantly is horrified and regrets it and runs away. The next morning, his best friend Henry surprises him by showing up and saying, hey, I go to school here now too. And when they return to Victor's apartment, the creature's gone. Victor is then bedridden for like a year because he's sick and weak. Mind you, the entire time he was building his creature, he was staying up all night, not eating, and basically being your typical modern day Valorant player. Once he starts feeling better, he gets a letter from his family from Geneva saying his youngest brother has since been murdered and Victor needs to come back to be with his family and like a funeral and stuff, you know, because his brother died. He then returns home to Geneva where he sees an unmistakably large frame of a human scale a cliff in record time. It's the monster, if you couldn't pick up on that. Shaken, he now knows, in his mind, it was the monster who strangled and murdered his little brother. And he goes to tell his family. When he goes to tell them, though, they're like, we already know. It's this girl named Justine. She had this locket on her that proves that she killed the boy. Then they try and say, no, she's innocent, but she's found guilty and put to death. Eventually, Victor leaves Geneva again to go back to Ingolstadt and encounters the monster in the mountains. Surprise, the creature is very intelligent and talks and gets Victor to sit down in a cave with him and listen to his own story. So now we're listening to a story within a story within a story. Nice. The monster goes on to tell his story, saying how he ran away from Victor's apartment that night and was left to the elements in the woods and how it sucked. He discovered fire and survived on nuts and berries. He had a run-in with some random village and they tried to kill him because, well, he's an 8-foot tall man made from dead body parts. He's kind of scary to 18th century Europeans. He runs west and finds a little run-down shed on a farm next to a cottage. He goes and lives in there, hiding away from people that live there. The family that lives there is French and consists of an old man with his son and daughter. During the daytime, the creature hides in the shed and watches and listens to them, eventually even learning French. Wish I could do that. I have over 250 days on Duolingo, and I still suck. Anyway, during the nighttime, though, he goes out and forages for his nuts and berries, but also helps the family with chores secretly, like gardening and shoveling snow. This goes on for several seasons, but the creature is getting lonely and he wants to befriend these French people and live among them, so he plots to wait for when the young people are away and visit the father, who's blind. The plan is the father can't judge him based on his appearance and will get to understand the creature is caring and complex, and the father can defend the creature as good to his younger counterparts. Of course, this goes horribly wrong, because the young people come home early and see the creature before he can befriend the old blind man, and they fight him and chase him away. That night, they abandon their house out of fear of the creature. The creature gets angry and swears that this is the fault of his creator for him being like this. He swears revenge and learns his creator's name by a piece of paper in the lab coat he stole from Victor's apartment on the night of his birth. May I just interject and say that, of course, the French are to blame for this. You know, they couldn't simply treat a horrible looking monster in their home nicely. Ugh, classic French, you know? At this point, the creature makes his way to Geneva because that's the place where the piece of paper says he can find Frankenstein. When he gets there, though, he runs into Victor's youngest brother, who the creature thinks he can befriend because he has not yet been tainted by humanity's notions of what is monstrous or not. Of course, this goes horribly wrong, again, because giant monster to a little kid is scary. The little kid says, I'm going to tell my dad Frankenstein, and the monster realizes, hey, Frankenstein, that's the guy I hate. I'm going to kill you now. And well, he does. He takes the locket off the dead boy because inside there's a picture of Victor's mom, and well, she's pretty, so the monster takes it. Later that night, he finds Justine asleep in some hay in the barn and puts the locket in her pocket to frame her. After all this retelling, at the end, the creature demands one thing from Victor. Make me a wife just like me, wretched and all, so that I cannot be alone in this cruel world. Victor refuses at first, but then reluctantly agrees so long the creature and his bride quit Europe forever and stop hurting people. The monster agrees and dips out. Victor goes back to Geneva and doesn't get to work, he just sits around all sad again. Eventually his dad is like, hey, do you want to marry Elizabeth? And Victor is like, of course, even though it's not true. He's like, I just need to go on one more journey to do something before I can marry her. And his dad is like, okay, 1 year though, but then you come back and marry this girl who's basically your sister. Victor and Henry then depart to Britain so Victor can make his bride away from Geneva to keep his family safe. Henry stays in like central Britain while Victor goes far north onto a little island off the main island to work on this bride. He's almost done with his work when lo and behold, the creature is there admiring Victor's work through the window all creepy like. Victor is reminded of how the creature is evil and whatnot and destroys the bride in front of the monster's eyes. The monster wails and runs off into the night and leaves by boat. Victor, knowing he has doomed his family and everyone important to him, gets all his shit together and leaves the island, dumping the bride's unfinished body into the ocean. The wind is too strong though, and he can't control his boat, so he falls asleep on the water and wakes up washing upon the coastline. When he gets there, everyone treats him with hostility, claiming he killed someone because a body just washed up on shore that night before, and they saw a boat looking like Victor's leave the coast. He realized he is in Ireland, and when they show him the body of the man he apparently murdered, it is Henry, his best friend. He goes crazy, gets bedridden again, all while being charged with murder. His dad comes from Geneva to Ireland to get him back to Geneva and prepares Victor to marry Elizabeth. Victor knows Elizabeth will die by the monster's hand, but still marries her anyway because it's what he's supposed to do. He then takes her on their honeymoon, and of course it goes horribly wrong again when the monster shows up and murders Elizabeth right in front of Victor. Frankenstein then swears he will kill the monster and chases him across Europe for months until they end up in the Arctic where the ice breaks apart, leaving Victor floating on the ocean with no way to catch his enemy. This is now where we are at the beginning of the book, and Walton is like, whoa man, that's some heavy stuff. Victor is still arrogant, but now lusting for revenge is like, I need to kill him or die trying. Well, it's going to be the latter, because Victor is malnourished and sick and has no strength to keep going. He dies, and the crew and Walton are all very sad. Then the creature shows up to see Victor's dead body, the body of his creator, his very own god. He feels immense remorse and swears to quit humanity forever. He jumps ship and is never seen again. And surprisingly, that's it. That is the story of Frankenstein, all covered in about, 15 paragraphs, give or take. If by some measure you're still watching after all that, I think we deserve a little water break. So let's all take about 30 seconds to drink some water and collect our bearings. Wow, 32 seconds. We got off lucky. You've heard me go over the entire book, and now it is time to go deeper, like I promised, and talk about some lingering thoughts. Foremost, was Frankenstein wrong? Should Victor have satisfied the monster's request and made his bride? Was Victor truly to blame for the events of the story? From the moment we meet Victor and he begins to tell his story, it is evident what kind of man he is. He thinks himself grand and intelligent. He unnecessarily tells his life story from the very moment it starts. Is it truly so important that Walton hears about how Victor was born in Naples that led him to be trapped on the ice in the Arctic? Victor, time and time again, was selfish in his endeavors and the way he lived his life. I mean, most evidently was him creating the monster and giving it life. He does not consider himself capable of mistakes and that he's free of consequence. Yet the moment he gets what he desires, he abandons his creation, leaving it to fend for himself. This very choice is what leads to Victor's downfall, and everyone he cares about dying at the hands of the monster. He was creator and god to the creature, and left it. Should he have made the bride for the monster? Maybe if he was there for the creature and cared for it, he would have understood the creature had the capacity for kindness beyond that of evil. He may have been more willing to make the creature a bride if he was responsible for his own choices. Regardless, I implore you to come to your own conclusion on that matter. When we should reach the midpoint of the story, when Victor hears the monster story, I find it difficult to not empathize with the creature in some ways. A being well endowed by its creator, yet left to its own devices in a world that does not care for it, a world which vilifies its very existence, its very nature. Yes, you should have known that we would talk about this. An obvious yet still prominent theme to this story is the classic of nature versus nurture. The idea that we are born one way or that we are a product of our environment. A very popular notion amongst fans of this novel is that of naming the monster Adam. As Adam was the first created by God, the monster was the first created by Victor, made in their own respective images. Even in the book, chapter 15, like Adam, I was apparently united by no link to any other being in existence, but his state was far different from mine in every other respect. This comes at a time when Adam, as I will call him for the remainder of this video, was living in the shed next to the French family. Adam was questioning his very nature, who he was, what he was, where did he come from, what was his purpose in life? Was it his nature to be hideous and hated by the world of men? Adam goes on to say right after, he had come forth from the hands of God, a perfect creature, happy and prosperous, guarded by the especial care of his creator. He was allowed to converse with and acquire knowledge from beings of a superior nature. But I was wretched, helpless, and alone. This, Adam points out that his creator had left him with no answers and with no help in this life. It was Victor that made him, but it was not Victor that cared for him. He seemingly lacked the very nurture he required to be a good person. He finishes off with this. Many times I considered Satan as the fitter emblem of my condition, for often, like him, when I viewed the bliss of my protectors, the bitter gall of envy rose within me. Was it his very being to be evil and bring down destruction upon the Frankensteins? Was it his nature to be Satan rather than that of Adam, which his creator set out to make? Or was it because he was made that way through his experiences of life? At the beginning of the video, I asked the very important question, what makes us human? Is it our bodies? Well, no, because other primates have very similar bodies to our own, and that certainly was the case for Adam, who was made from our very bodies. Is it our capacity for language? It is said whales have a language. Does that make them as human as myself? Even so, Adam was able to learn French by listening to those people. What about using tools, forming intelligent thoughts, or questioning one's own being? Adam was capable of all those things, and yet we would all say that he is not a man like you or me. I raised the question, was there any evil in the monster? Any more evil than we as humans are capable of? Are we not capable of murder and envy? Those were the marks of Adam's crimes that made him evil. If that is so the case, then maybe I am just as evil, or have the ability to be evil. No, certainly you would say no, it was not his envy or desire to be loved that made him evil. It was the murders that he committed. Well, without the guidance of his creator, were those murders evil? It was the hubris of Victor that made Adam, and it was the consequence of that hubris that made him fearful and abandon his creation. It was that which led to the demise of so many. There's always men in life who think themselves too great they do not see their hubris and how it will be their very downfall. Frankenstein is a classic tale known around the world, except there are so many misconceptions around it due to modern takes on the story. For instance, how many thought or still think that Frankenstein was the name of the monster until it was pointed out to you? Now, yes, we could all argue that technically if the monster was like a son to Victor, that it would subsequently take his name, making him a Frankenstein. And I would lie in saying I didn't agree. That's not the point though. The point is, even I thought the monster was Frankenstein because growing up, I had no other reason to think so. Everyone thinks mad scientists crafting a giant, ugly monster, zapping it with lightning and screaming, "It's alive." No, he didn't say that. It is alive, but no. The modern depiction is very far removed from the original. I mean, Adam in the book is fiercely intelligent, as demonstrated, and completely capable of forming complex thoughts and understanding emotions. Though in some movies it's, oh, fire bad and I'm going to wreck stuff. I think the book is amazing, so why all the changes to the story? I can't tell you. I wish I could, but I can't. I do, though, think it is important to understand that disconnect, and rather than picking one over the other, we may still enjoy the both we have. On the topic of original versus modern takes on the story, I have a large gripe with the changing of Adam to an ugly creature. In the book, Mary Shelley describes the monster as beautiful with yellow skin that barely covered his muscles, lustrous and flowing black hair, pearly white teeth, and black lips. I mean, Victor even says his limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful. I mean, later, Victor describes Adam as unnerving despite that and such. So I just don't understand making him ugly, or least of all green and gray with bolts sticking out of his large forehead. All of that is for me to bring up a point I hold very dear to my heart, as it is pertinent to my own life. This book gives off heavy queer vibes. Victor and his relationship with his beautiful creation and his relationship with Henry is just, even with Walton and Victor interacting, it's just giving, a certain,
Je ne sais quoi.
yeah. Just the way everything is described makes you think. I mean, an 8-foot tall man with everything in proportion. Everything in proportion. Everything. Victor even worries about the monsters having kids if he does create the bride for Adam. So, like, why would he have to worry about that in the first place? Hmm? Hmm? On top of that, there's like no chemistry between Victor and Elizabeth. I mean, Victor is so apprehensive to marry Elizabeth. Yes, in fear of her getting murdered by Adam, whatever. Beyond that, though, he never seemed to want to be with her. That was like his sister, and well, even if she wasn't, I think he just didn't like her like that. I don't know. I just think if you are a person who already has that lens going into this book and reading it, you'll definitely pick up on those vibes like I did. My conclusion is I really liked this book. I think the build up behind the novel of Mary Shelley and her writing, it is so fascinating. The story itself isn't capturing to me, and I've always had a love for gothic horror. There are plenty of good themes in this book as well. So even if you watch this video all the way through, I implore you to consider picking it up for yourself and try giving it a read. You might enjoy it. This video has been one of my most ambitious videos to date. This is the second book review I've done, but this time I think I've excelled in every metric over the last. I don't particularly think my last one was much good, but I think it is important to remember where I came from, and hopefully where I can go from here. I love reading, and doing these videos feels like a reward of sorts that push me to start reading more avidly again. With all that being said, this video took a lot of time for me to complete, from writing an 8-page script, and recording and editing. This was no small or simple feat for me, so if you enjoyed it, I would ask that you give the video a like, maybe even subscribe. Also, I am a person that loves perfection, so if you have any problems or complaints with this video, please leave them in the comments. I probably won't read them or respond to them, but the next time I try making one of these videos, I might just take your criticism into consideration. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.